Days for any member who would like to submit a written statement. We'll now recognize the distinguished witness on the first panel. We have two panels today. Pleased to welcome the Honorable Sarah Saldana, Director of United States Immigration Customs Enforcement at the Department of Homeland Security. Thank you for being here. Pursuant to committee rules, all witnesses are to be sworn before they testify. If you will please rise and raise your right hand. Do you solemnly swear or affirm that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth?
I do.
Thank you. Let the record reflect the witness answered in the affirmative. We would appreciate it if you would limit your oral testimony to 5 minutes. Your entire written statement will obviously be made part of the record. Ms. Saldana, you are now recognized, Director, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Ranking Member Cummings, and other distinguished members of this committee. I cannot tell you how disheartening it is to sit here and hear an issue and very important issues related to the topic of immigration reform be bandied about as a political football. I'm a former United States attorney. I was a prosecutor for 10 years. I am about the law and law enforcement. I'm about identifying problems and correcting them. I am here to tell the public what the situation is with some of the issues we face, inform the public, and I would really appreciate we focus on solutions as opposed to political banter. Along with our sister agencies at the Department of Homeland Security, ICE has no smaller mission than the national security, border security, and public safety of our citizens. Like any law enforcement agency, we deal with serious and difficult matters every day. In the area of immigration, recent estimates are that there are about 11.2 million illegal immigrants in the country. There are approximately 2 million undocumented immigrants who are involved in some form or fashion in ICE's administrative process. There are about 500,000 of those who are part of active cases in the immigration courts. ICE detention program booked in approximately 300,000 individuals last fiscal year. And as you know, we've been funded at the 34,000 bed level for the last couple of years. You, the Congress, have not only provided the funds to carry out our responsibilities, for which we're very grateful, but you've also set forth the framework to execute those responsibilities. And it's all right here in the Immigration and Nationalization Act. You tell us who we are required as a mandatory matter to detain, and you tell us who we exercise our ability to release someone and not detain, make a decision about not detaining or bond for that matter. Given the numbers I've just cited, obviously, a very small percentage of individuals are detained while an immigration judge, under the system that you, the Congress, has provided, are detained while that judge makes a decision in their removal proceedings. I am deeply mindful that this is not simply a discussion of statistics, capacity, policies, or procedures. There are families whose lives are personally affected by these decisions. As a human being and a mother, never mind my prosecutorial experience, I feel very strongly anytime someone is injured or murdered or killed, otherwise killed by any person, and certainly those within the immigration system. I know that the women and men of ICE work tirelessly to enforce the law and protect the public, and they steadfastly bear the enormous responsibility that they are charged with. When the chairman, respectfully, sir, says we just decided, that's being ICE, to let them out on the streets and, quote, we chose not to detain people, that is misleading the public and particularly these victims about the immigration situation and the entire picture. I think this committee well knows that this year over two-thirds of the criminal releases, something I wish you had pointed out, over two-thirds of the criminal releases were as a result of the Supreme Court telling us we had to release someone. It wasn't ICE choosing to do so. And another portion of the courts otherwise telling us that we had to release the immigration courts, who have overall supervisory responsibility over this system. So to sit there and say that the proud women and men of law enforcement in ICE are choosing to release criminals is absolutely unforgivable I am very proud of representing those men and women. Many of them are former police officers, sheriff's department members, and they do not go around trying to put criminals on the streets. So I want the record to be clear, and I want these victims' families to know exactly what ICE is facing. And I want them to have an accurate picture of that. So when ICE makes a custody determination upon an alien with a criminal conviction, we act in accordance with the law that you have given us. We are committed to carefully reviewing the circumstances of each case to ensure we make prudent decisions and to use the tools at our disposal, including supervision and conditions of release. Further, we include in our data set things over which we have no control. When somebody's claiming to be a citizen or an LPR, there are additional requirements on us. This is a very complex law, and every time, or virtually every time, I have been before a committee, I have begged, I have asked, work with ICE, work with me, work with the Secretary for comprehensive immigration reform. We can't kick this down the road or after an election. We need to fix this, and I implore you to help us. So, this issue has been of great importance to me since I started at the agency about a year and a half ago. In March of last year, I set up a system that I think I've testified about to this agency to review every criminal release that there is. We have a panel that I've actually visited with. I'm in the process right now, like I do with any policy, of revisiting the policy to see how effective it's been over the last year, because we started it in March, and to see what we can do better with that in that regard. I am willing to learn, and I do listen. So, as you're aware, we're proud of the fact, and I think it's as a result in part of this panel, of going from 36,000 releases in 2013 to, in 2015, a little over 19,700. So you know, I want to be sure it's clear that while two-thirds of the criminal releases in 2013 and 2014 were characterized, even here, as resulting from ICE determinations, that ratio actually is reversed in 2015, and as I said earlier, we have about two-thirds of our criminal releases being required of us by courts. And with respect to what Congressman Cummings pointed out, and that is the recalcitrant countries and getting people to take back their criminals. This world is a chaotic world. We have countries with great instability, countries that have suffered tremendous, even natural disasters like Haiti, and are in turmoil, and trying to deal with them is very hard. But I am working with the Department of State. Quite frankly, this afternoon I'm meeting with Assistant Secretary Michelle Bond to talk some more about what more we can do with respect to recalcitrant countries. And I'm glad to do that. Let me conclude by saying that having heard directly from families over the last 11 years of victims of crime who suffered tremendous loss, I personally remain committed, Mr. Chairman, I personally remain committed to implementing ICE's priorities in a smart and strategic manner and to safeguard our communities and maximize the agency's success. I thank you for the opportunity to address the group, and I await your questions.
Thank you. I'll now recognize myself for 5 minutes. The numbers you gave us just in the last 2 days, discretionary releases by ICE were 54%. The total was 46,422. The Chavitz rulings, you said, were two-thirds of the reason, and yet the numbers you gave us show that it's less than 10%. Your microphone, please.
I don't know which numbers you're looking at.
You're the one that said that two-thirds of the reason that you release people is based on the Supreme Court decision. The numbers you gave us just 2 days ago show that that number is actually less than 10%.
The numbers we gave you, sir, were for 2015?
We have 2015, 2014, and 2013.
Okay, let's just focus right now on 2015 as an example, although we can do each year if you'd like. 19,723, there were 19,723 criminal releases.
Let me ask you another way.
No, because you've just left an impression that more than that has happened.
No,
11% were Chavitz releases. And IJ orders, the immigration courts that oversee the entire immigration system, were 52%.
Okay, we
Only
will hash out the numbers with your own numbers, but what is unacceptable is even one discretionary. Why do you even release one? Why do you even release one person?
Because of the statute the Congress
No,
has
it's
given us.
not. It's discretionary on your part, and you're not doing it. You took more than $100 million and let it go to other purposes outside of the Immigration Customs Enforcement. You're not maximizing the amount of money that you want in order to get to the beds that is mandated under the law. And you've asked for $185 million less for detention and transportation. You're not going to be convincing us that you're dedicated to removing these criminal aliens.
If I may answer your question.
Well, yes, go.
You have said here only a certain number of convictions even, they're primarily convictions, offenses with convictions, are subject to mandatory detention.
And this is where you're totally wrong. You have somebody who commits homicide? Yes, we want them deported. That's the law.
Then put it in the statute, sir, because in the statute say if they do not commit one of those offenses that are specifically enumerated, including aggravated felonies, then these people are not subject to mandatory detention, which you specifically outlined here. When I say you, I mean the Congress. The rest you say, okay, ICE, you will then make a determination based on what the judges, federal judges of this country make every day, and that is based on flight risk and harm to public safety or potential harm to public safety. You will decide which ones can be released.
And there's a whole list of categories there that are harm to public safety, including those that commit homicide, that you went ahead and released anyway. And so that law is crystal clear. You are making these discretionary choices in releasing these people out into the public, and they're committing more crimes. And I don't understand why you don't deport them. Use as an excuse these countries that won't accept them. Here's my question for you. Based on Section 243D of the Immigration Nationality Act, how many times have you recommended to the State Department in writing that these countries are, according to the law, on being notified by the Attorney General that the government of the foreign country denies or unreasonably delays accepting an alien, and then it goes on, that the Secretary shall order the consular officers in that foreign country to discontinue granting visas or non-immigrant visas? How many times have you made that recommendation to the Attorney General or to the State Department?
I don't have the precise number, but we have.
Have you ever?
Yes, we have, sir. We have a
Which
memorandum.
countries, right off the top of your head, which countries have you recommended that
I can't tell you off the top of my head. I hate
When will you get me that information?
I can get it to you within a week, sir.
Okay, so you will give me, just to make sure we're on the same page, the letters that you have given either to the Attorney General's office or the State Department regarding the problems that you're having with and the recommendations that you're making about the countries that will not accept these aliens.
And yes, and you understand that I have to talk to the Department of State about that because some of these are sensitive areas that I believe we can talk about this further in chambers, sir, that I believe you would not want me to
No, we're going to talk about it in the public. I want to know which countries are not taking, because you know what? They shouldn't be getting federal aid, and we shouldn't be giving them visas so that more people from those countries can come to the United States. I don't know what you think is so sensitive about that, but I want you to prioritize Americans rather than those other countries. That's what I want to hear. I want to know that the citizens of our states are your #1 priority, and put it out there in the public. Let's know and understand which countries are not taking back the criminals that came here illegally and should be deported back into their country.
Let me remind you, sir, that the Department of State is the one that issues visas, withholds aid. We don't have money to give aid to countries. That's not what we do.
I know, but
we do have a memorandum of understanding with the Department of State where we say we are going to recommend to you certain steps, but we have it in a step-by-step procedure because this is a complicated world, I think you all understand, and we have to look at each country separately. Syria and Iraq, that's a pretty hopeless situation in trying to return those immigrants to those countries.
Do you really think Syria and Iraq is your job and your responsibility to make that determination? Here's what the law says, and I'm quoting, on being notified by the Attorney General that the government of a foreign country denies or unreasonably delays accepting an alien who is a citizen, subject, national, or resident of the country, after the Attorney General asks whether the government will accept the alien under this section, the Secretary shall. And so if you go to the first part of it...
What, sir?
shall order consular officers in that foreign country to discontinue granting immigrant visas or non-immigrant visas or both to citizens, subjects, nationals, and residents of that country until the Attorney General notifies the Secretary that the country has accepted the alien. What is incumbent upon you personally, in your duty and your role responsibility, is to make that notification. If you are trying to take even just one alien and deport them back to a country, these are criminal aliens. Remember, these are ones that committed crimes and were convicted of crimes. If you're trying to deport even one of those and the country won't take them back, you need to give that notification to the State Department.
And the State Department makes the decision. Let's just be clear.
And that, no, there's no decision, because under the statute it says the Secretary shall. And so it starts with you. And if you don't give them that notification, it doesn't work. My time has expired. I want to have, within a week's time, all of those letters, since you've been in office, that you have sent to the State Department and or Attorney General, telling them where there's a problem. And I don't want to hear about this excuse any further. Now I recognize the gentleman from Maryland.
Let me pick up just where the chairman left off. When that letter goes to the State Department, what happens then? Who makes the decision at that point? What happens?
There's a leadership group. The Consular Affairs Assistant Secretary, Michelle Bond, is the person I've been dealing with. She makes a recommendation to the Secretary of the Department of State, and they look at the whole picture with respect to that country and make a decision and notify us.
And then that is the decision?
Yes, sir.
And so you can't change that?
ICE is not in the business of issuing visas.
I see. Now let me, I want to make sure we put all this in some kind of context, because remember what I said in my opening statement. We're about reform and trying to find solutions. And we have these families here who have suffered greatly. And by the way, I hope that, I know you may be leaving after your testimony as is usual.
I'm staying.
Oh, good, because I want you to hear from them. I think they need to, they want you to hear their pain. And again, they come a good distance, and that, I thank you very much for doing that.
And I offered to both families, the Roots and Ms. Hartling, to meet with them personally.
Thank you very much. We need to eliminate any misperception that immigrants as a group are more likely to be criminals or commit acts of violence. Let's start with the likelihood of landing in jail. Census data from 1980, 1990, 2000, 2010 found that incarceration rates for native-born, essentially U.S. citizens, were 2 to 5 times higher than that of immigrants. Were you aware of that fact?
Yes.
Director? The fact contradicts the misconception that immigrants are inherently predisposed to be criminals. Would you agree with that?
Yes.
So studies have widely shown that recidivism rate for immigrant criminals is lower than for the general population. Is that right?
Yes, sir.
And for example, based on the data submitted by ICE for fiscal year 2014, less than 5% of the immigrant criminals committed new crimes after release, compared to more than 20% of all criminals across 30 United States, U.S. states. Do you understand that?
That sounds right. I've looked at the studies by the Department of Justice and the statistics.
Given this information, do you believe it is fair to say that a person's immigration status does not indicate an increased likelihood that they will commit another crime?
Yes.
Now, I got to tell you that if I were the family of a victim, I would say, well, Cummings, I'm really not interested in hearing that, because I suffered a loss that will never be replaced. But I'm trying to just put all of this in some kind of context, because I think if we look at the total picture, then we have a better chance of coming up with a solution that it truly addresses the problem. Now, I'd like to discuss the cases in which ICE has discretion. The chairman talked about discretion, and I think he was absolutely right to address that. ICE has explained in the past that some criminal immigrant detainees are released after posting bond set by career ICE law enforcement officers. Can you please tell us again, why not simply deport all criminal alien detainees that you have the discretion to deport? And is it a question of resources?
It's not so much a question of resources, sir, as it is the statute. Congress, in its wisdom, gave people who were found in the country and determined initially to be in the country illegally a very complex set of rights and ability to appeal and to have their cases heard by immigration courts. Let me just make this really clear. We cannot, we'd be violating the statute, which I think no one here wants me to do. We cannot deport somebody without a final order of removal from a court. ICE doesn't deport people on its own motion. It has to have an order from the court. And obviously we've got to have the ability to put that person in the country of their origin.
Now, ICE has reported having the resources to deport only about 4% of the 11 million documented immigrants. Is that right?
That's right. And in fact, I think you all have seen the studies that indicate that if we tried to deport 11.2 million people, it would cost anywhere from $650 billion to $750 billion.
So ICE also explained that discretionary releases typically occur when individuals associated with less serious offenses, based on your experience as a prosecutor. And you were a former U.S. attorney?
Yes, sir.
I have tremendous respect for our U.S. attorneys. Why is it important for law enforcement agencies in general to have the discretion to release individuals on bond? What's that about? Well,
again, it's important for us because we have to manage the money that this Congress has given us. But I want to repeat, the bond procedure, the decisions to detain are all, or not detain, are all outlined in here. We must look at flight risk, threat to public safety when we make those decisions. But you have given us that authority. And it's important for us because we've got to manage the number of beds we have and obviously the entire fund that you have given us in order to remove people from the country.
I only have a minute left on my time. I understand that these determinations are based on risk evaluations, giving consideration to factors like age, physical and mental health, risk of harm to public safety, risk of flight, and whether any mandatory detention factors apply. Director, can you please explain why it's important that these evaluations are conducted on a case-by-case basis? And then, knowing what you know and hearing what you know you're going to hear, I want you to tell us things that we could do as congressfolk to help you do the job that you're trying to do.
Okay. If I may start with the last part of that question first, I would love to sit down with this committee or a group of this committee to go through this statute and talk about comprehensive immigration reform, what we can do with respect to some of the very complicated parts of this. And let's not forget, this is just the statute. We have rulings left and right from all over the country, literally going left and right, that we have to abide by, even though we may be appealing them. But with respect to your overall question regarding discretion, we have committed to deal with each immigrant on a case-by-case basis. Because we don't have, I don't think we have the will, nor do we have the funds to deport 11.2 million people. We have to make decisions on a case-by-case basis. Bright line rules don't work here. If we have a bright line rule that we're going to deport anybody who comes into our custody, we don't have time to do what we've been trying to do and very successfully done, and that is focus on criminal aliens. So this is why we need to have that discretion and ability to make the decisions that we do. And I will tell you, sir, are we perfect? I have great faith in the judgments of our law enforcement officers in making these determinations. They are experienced, well-trained, and they care about the safety of our community. Are we perfect? I can say firsthand I am not, and neither are our officers, but we do the very best we can.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Now I recognize the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Micah, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you. And I do want to echo the director's remarks that our Customs and Border Patrol are some of the most professional, accomplished, hardworking individuals in the federal government. They work day in and day out to do their job in protecting our borders. But we do hear that things have affected their ability to control our borders. First of all, the number of deportations total is down fairly dramatically in this administration. Isn't that correct, Director?
The numbers are lower than it has.
We have a chart there. Can you guys put the chart up? So at the end of the Bush administration, we were deporting about 250,000. We're down to about 100,000. 2014, maybe even lower than that. That's total deportations, right?
No, sir. I think you say up there
It's
interior.
It's total deportations. And then if we
Sir,
turn to criminal.
Your chart says interior deportations, not
Yes.
total.
Yes.
Interior, there's also on the border
Right.
removals.
But again, well, in this case, I'm taking they're in the United States, in the interior, not at the border. In any event, criminal deportations were 110,000 in 2013, and now they're down to 63,000. I don't have a chart on that. Those are numbers provided by you. Is that correct? 63,000 in 2014. I don't know what 2015 is.
Well,
I'm sorry, 2015 is 63,000. I don't have 2014. And 2013 was 110. In any event, it's down.
Those are not the numbers I
Now,
have.
well, again, all I can go is by what we got from you all. And you've said that the law prohibits some of your actions to deport. But actually, the agents tell us, well, two things. First, they say they're hamstrung by the president's executive order that has granted some amnesty to millions of illegal aliens. That's what the agents say. Have you heard that?
From our agents or from Border Patrol?
From your agents?
I've heard reports of that, sir.
Okay.
Nobody.
Again, they're telling us that. They also say that some of those people even, again, that there was a court decision, and ICE has admitted, however, that of the 2,457 of the 30,000 releasees, that would be the number affected by the court decision, which was Zadias versus Davis, so that 57% were actually released at ICE's discretion, at your discretion. So we have more than half of those at your discretion. And that's we've had hearings, we've had your folks in, and this is what they're telling us. The other thing, too, is you have the right to deport people, and again, the discretion is given to you. Again, your agents have told us, but in more than half the cases, you haven't exercised that discretion. Then you also have, when the courts do let some folks out on appeal, these criminal aliens that have committed an act, how many times have you appealed the bonds?
Bonds, some occasions. I don't have the precise number.
Could you provide that for the record? Because I think it's fairly limited.
I can't.
But you have that discretion, too. So 57% of the time where you have discretion, you haven't exercised it. Then where people have committed it, they're out on bond, and you could appeal and go after those folks, you don't do it. One of the other things that was brought to my attention is we've lost total control of the border. And this is most disturbing. Got this yesterday. This is the Customs and Border Patrol system, the entire system that deals with passport control. This is just the last 2 months, from March 4th, 2016 to April 17th. The system has been down almost 2 total days, and this is a record of the time the system has done. The system we have to control our border and who's coming in is imploding. I don't know what's going on here, and I'd ask maybe the chairman of government operations or whoever is in charge of this area in our subcommittee to look at this. We've lost control of our borders, and your system that protects us, and the main computer system, has been down, 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 and I think this is something that needs to be looked at. I'm going to hand you a copy of this, and I'd like you to respond to these statistics.
Are these ICE statistics or Customs and Border Protection?
Custom and Border.
That's another agency,
yes,
sir.
But this is the system that controls the passports and entry into the United States. And you're also in DHS. I'd like to have a response for the record.
We should get the witness best able to
Okay,
answer
and you'll help
questions
me with that, and I appreciate it.
regarding CBP.
Thank you. The gentleman's time has expired. We'll now recognize the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Maloney, for 5 minutes.
Okay. Thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank our Director Saldana for your public service, first as a U.S. attorney in Texas, and now as Director of ICE. And I would like to understand the challenges that you and ICE face in trying to deport criminal aliens back to their countries, and the countries refuse to take them. I want to understand what the challenges are, and more importantly, what can we do to force a country to take back their own citizen when we are deporting them for serious criminal crimes. Now, as you know, the Chadwick family is here. They lost their beloved child, and they rightfully want to know why a convicted, threatening, terrible felon was not deported. When he served his conviction in the United States, he was out on release. The law said we can deport him, we should deport him, and as I understand it, his home country, Haiti, refused to take him. And I want to understand how this happens, and I want to understand what we can do about it. And in this case, the guy's name was Jean-Jacques of Haiti. And as we reviewed the record in this particular case, it is stunning and shocking how many times the Haitian officials approved his return to Haiti and then reversed themselves and essentially pulled the rug out from under U.S. officials and would not let him come home to his own country. To give a specific example, on October 1st, 2012, U.S. officials submitted a request to Haiti to deport him. Haitian officials gave their verbal confirmation that he was approved to go back to Haiti. And are you aware that Haitian officials approved his removal to Haiti on October 1st, 2012?
Yes. And you have cited, I don't know if you're done.
Yeah. And then they changed their minds. They told you, U.S. officials, that he was denied for removal. They pointed out that he was approved 3 days earlier. And do you know why the Haitian officials decided on a whim that he should not be allowed or would not be allowed to come back to his country of origin?
We have not been given a response. It is tremendously frustrating. We want to send this person back. We wanted to. And there are others, unfortunately, others in that same position. As I said, with respect to Haiti.
I want to go on, and this is really critical, because if we had succeeded in removing him and deporting him, we would have saved an American life, we would have saved an American family, and it was the right thing to do. So 1 week later, unbelievably, on October 10th, Haitian officials acknowledged to U.S. officials that they had actually approved a flight to Haiti that included Mr. Jacques. He was supposed to go, but then on the very same day, they reversed themselves again. They said that he could not board the plane. What in the world was going on with these Haitian officials? Were they just playing games with us? I mean, this is the second time they denied the deportation request of the United States government. And by treaty, they had approved that illegal aliens and certainly criminal aliens would be accepted back in their country.
And what's extraordinary, Congresswoman, is that actually the Haitian government has worked with us in many instances before. So it is a very arbitrary granting and then denial and then granting and denial. It's extraordinarily frustrating. Just like the United States requires people to have travel documents when they come through the United States, all of these other governments require that.
My time is almost up. And now this is almost unbelievable. Then again on February 2nd of 2016 of this year, U.S. officials tried again to send him back to Haiti. And on this day, Haitian officials informed us, the U.S., that Mr. Jacques was once again approved for removal, and then again, on the very same day, these Haitian officials withdrew their approval. Now, what I want to know is what can we do about it? This is something I would like to work with the majority party on accomplishing. I personally support universal reform on immigration, but if we can't reach a quick approval on that, we should get a quick approval on how we can deport someone back to their country, especially when they are, quote, allies, when we have treaties, when we are literally giving this country aid, and yet 3 times they really made fun of the American government and said, no, we're not taking them back, reversing a verbal confirmation that they would take this criminal back. Now, I feel very strongly about this. I have my own 2 daughters. I can't imagine the grief that this family is facing. And this is such an injustice, not only to this American family and to this young girl, but also to our whole country, that they will not abide by the treaty. They will not take their felon back that came here illegally. And my question is, and it's a serious one, how can we enforce this and how can we stop this type of abuse of the American government?
Well, we have a system in place, and we have an understanding with the Department of State, a memorandum of understanding.
But if they refuse to take them, which is what they're doing, what do we do about it?
Exactly. And what we need to do is have Department of State at the table, but we need to talk about how we accelerate the process, because right now it is very, very slow.
But you accelerated it. You achieved it. He was ready to be deported. Yes. And the country said, no, we have got to get a system where we can force these countries to be responsible.
I agree.
Gentlewoman's time has expired. The Chair notes the presence of Mr. Courtney from Connecticut, and I ask unanimous consent that he be allowed to fully participate in today's hearing. Without objection, so ordered. I'd also like to introduce for the record a CBP system down times log. Without objection, so ordered. And the Chair will now recognize the gentleman from Michigan for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Director Saldana, thank you for being here. But let me reiterate the fact that, number one, we support the proud enforcement officials that you work with and that you lead. We expect that the overwhelming majority of them are as frustrated as we are in trying to deal with the problem. But our frustration goes up to leadership aspects, even above you, in concerns in making sure that our citizens are safe. We're also concerned with the fact that there are plenty of desiring immigrants who want to come to this country for all the right reasons, that it's more difficult for them to come because of what's going on with these illegals, and especially the ones perpetrating the crimes and the murders in our society. And to get to the accomplishment of having comprehensive immigration reform take place, we have to make sure that our systems are working to keep this terrible, cruel element out of our society. And so let me ask you a question. Information that I have, statistics says that as of August 2014, the administration indicated that over 375,000 aliens and 121,000 level 1 convicted criminal aliens who the Obama administration deems, and I quote, the worst of the worst, end quote, were removed as a result of the secure communities. Instead of continuing to utilize that successful existing system, the Obama administration ended it and implemented the priorities enforcement program that we're under right now. Why did the administration end a successful program that flags criminal aliens once they're booked into jails?
Sir, we may have to have a discussion of what successful actually means. I think you're aware of the fact that
people living and not dying.
I think you're aware of the fact that we, the United States, have been sued many times because of secured communities. And the fact that there are people that had claims that they asserted in federal court. Some ended up being successful, even though we challenged them. With respect to the implementation of the program, many people are concerned that as a result of secure communities and the way it was implemented, something that was in place before I was actually gone, before I got there, that there was a tremendous controversy about it.
Let me jump on the Secure Communities program that's been ended. How many detainers were issued by ICE but ignored by local law enforcement?
I don't have that number in front of me.
Do you have the number of how many of those ignored detainers resulted in alien being released and subsequently committing a crime?
No, sir.
Do you have
There's secure communities, you're asking?
secure communities?
Yes.
How many of those ignored detainers resulted in additional crimes being committed? Do you have that number?
I don't have it.
Well, you've indicated you want solutions, but it seemed like we'd want these numbers in order to get to those solutions, wouldn't it?
I just don't have them on the top of my head, sir. They're available. We can probably find them. It may take a manual search of our records, but and some time, but we can. The fact that I can't answer that right now shouldn't undermine my point about wanting to do something positive in this area.
Well, I'd like to have those numbers provided for our committee. And whether it's the week that you initiated, you said about the letters or not, we'd like it as quickly as possible. Why is the federal government satisfied with localities coming in contact with removable aliens and then not collecting sufficient information, records, fingerprints, etc.?
Well, that is happening. And when you say removable aliens, no alien is removable until we have a court order. So they go through a very, sometimes years in the making process, a very long process, to make that determination. I will tell you, though, you know that Secure Communities, that program, was replaced by the Priority Enforcement Program, where we work with all of these state and local jurisdictions. That's what I did as a United States Attorney. We relied on local law enforcement, not only police departments, but sheriff's departments to assist us, and we do that.
And aren't there stipulations for them to provide the information to you, and such as fingerprints on these people?
There's a provision in the statute that talks about cooperation from them, not specifically fingerprints, but cooperation.
So cooperation would include information that is necessary for protecting our citizens, correct?
It could.
It could. Well, maybe that's why this hearing is being held today, and hopefully information will come out so that families won't be seated in the room again, because there's indication that we have not done what's necessary to protect them. And that's my concern. And again, it's not the ICE agents. It's administration that isn't doing what's necessary, or at least pushing for the funds, the resources, the systems in place to make sure that we have that capability. And that's my concern. That's not a charge. That's a request. Help us to do the right thing, but in turn, don't give us excuses. And I yield back.
Another party, though, is the Congress, sir, and you could help us by...
I think we have helped you with plenty of things. We've asked questions today about why you haven't used some of those resources, why there hasn't been the pushback on other countries, why there hasn't been a request for dollars to put toward the programs that keep these people off the streets as opposed to other entities. And I yield back my time.
Gentleman's time has expired. The chair now recognizes Mr. Cartwright for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Director Saldana, for being here. But I also want to take time to acknowledge and thank everyone for the presence of the families here today, starting with you, Mrs. Hartling. Your daughter's case has been discussed a bit, and we'll talk more about it, but our hearts go out to you. And I know I speak for everyone here and everyone in the United States Congress in expressing our most profound condolences. Also, we have Chief Ralph Martin here taking up the cause of Marilyn Ferris. And I know she's not family to you, but she's starting to seem like it, I'm sure. So condolences to you as well. And thank you for taking up that cause. But we also have Michelle and Scott Root here today, and thank you. Okay. We have Scott Root here today, and I thank you for being here. An ineffable, unspeakable tragedy. I mean, we're talking about your daughter who just graduated college the day before with a 4.0 in, of all things, criminal justice.
And then the next day, in a drunken driving drag racing incident, an undocumented illegal struck her from behind with such force that she died within about 24 hours. Unbelievable. And this is a situation that I want to talk to you about, Director Saldana. We had this 19-year-old illegal, a young man named Mejia from Honduras. And really what happened after the crime was even more shocking because he got out on bail. There was a judge, this is in Nebraska, I think, and the judge let Mejia out on $50,000 bail. And if you know how bail works, if you post 10%, then you're out on bail. Well, 10% of $50,000 is $5,000. Mejia's brother came up with the money, and as soon as he got out, he was gone. And are you familiar with the case, Director Saldana?
Oh, yes.
Okay, so I want to look into that a little bit because the thing, I was a lawyer for 25 years, and I know a little bit about how bail is set. And one of the considerations is when the judge decides to set bail, is this person a flight risk? Is this person likely to be somebody who plunked down the 10% and skedaddle out and never be heard from again? In fact, Mejia had a history of brushes with the law before this horrible drunk driving incident. He had had a history of skipping out on other charges when the judge considered bail. But what I read, and I want you guys to disabuse me of this if it's wrong, but what I read was that the trial court judge never, the one charged with setting bail, never even heard that this was an illegal immigrant, never even heard of his history with the law, and most importantly, never even knew that he had skipped out on other charges before. This was the poster child for somebody that ought to have a very, very high bail set. And the judge never even knew it, and it was because the prosecution, which knew all these things, never informed the judge. Now, that's what I got from news accounts, and if it's wrong, that's why I'm asking it. I want you to tell me if it's wrong. But we saw in the news accounts that the Douglas County attorney acknowledged that his office could have handled the matter better. And we'll talk about it later, but if you're familiar with the case, Director Saldana, am I getting the facts right there?
More or less, although I can't speak to exactly what the judge had in his mind when he made the decision to release Mr. Mejia.
Well, let me interrupt you. In a case like that, does it require an ICE detainer for a local judge to set a high bail in a case of probable flight risk?
No, sir. He just needs to know the facts. And we obviously were not in the courtroom at that time. It's a state matter, as you all know, when it comes to this kind of activity. And I want to tell Mr. Root, express my sympathies as well with respect to this. I think you said earlier that that the DA had said that things could have been done better. There's a lot, unfortunately, there's a lot of different things that could have been done better, and I am going to use this as a when I said I was revisiting our criminal review process, I am going to use this as an example of what could we have done differently in this case, because I don't want this to happen again, obviously, and neither does the officer or the agents involved in this case.
Well, thank you, Director, and I do look forward to hearing from the families later today. Yield back.
I thank the gentleman. I recognize the gentleman from Arizona, Mr. Gosar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Ms. Saldana, I just want to, you've reached out to the families, but I want to make sure it's for the record that you reached out to the families around April 22nd only upon finding out about this hearing and their testimony. So I want to make sure that's for the record.
And I want to be sure for the record.
You don't understand. I made a statement. I made a statement, ma'am. So this is my time, not yours.
Okay. You understand that they're in.
Once again, it's my time.
And you understand that I'd like the record to be clear, sir. I am meeting with Ms. Hartley this afternoon. I don't want to.
I'm going on. I don't think you ought to be picking a fight with Arizona. Of all places, you better not go there. Operation Streamline, go away. Incarcerations over and over again, tell them to release them. It's not the men and women in ICE and Border Patrol. It's leadership, just like you, like the President, like the Attorney General, all the way across the board. So let's put a face on this. Are you aware in January 2015 of a young man in my home state of Arizona who was shot and killed by an illegal alien who is facing deportation proceedings but was out on bond? Are you familiar with the murder of Grant Rodenbeck by an illegal alien in Mesa, Arizona?
Yes.
This is important because I want to make sure you and your agency know about that your numbers that you cite and all these reckless, lawless policies direct have real consequences. Murderous consequences for real people and their families. One life lost in this manner is way too many. Wouldn't you agree?
Absolutely.
So the man who murdered Grant Rodenbeck was an illegal alien who, instead of being detained or deported, was out on bond. In fact, Apollonar Altamirano, a self-proclaimed drug cartel member, had deportation proceedings dragging on more than 2 years after he was released on bond following a conviction on a burglary charge. While out on bond, this illegal alien had 2 harassment charges, very similar to what my colleague on the other side was talking about in the previous case, against him, in which one of the victims said that she feared for her life several times, and claiming to the court he pointed a gun at her and her boyfriend. Yet this man remained on the streets. Now here's this thing you talk about, this discretionary issue. So then on January 19, 2015, Mr. Altamirano walked into a convenience store, demanded a pack of cigarettes in exchange for a jar of change. When the clerk, young Grant Rodenbeck, hesitated, Altamirano pointed a gun at Grant and shot him, fatally shooting him, 21 years old. Now, Director Saldana, Grant Rodenbeck's murder is a direct result of your agency's failed policies. Why do you let murderous people like this free into our communities? Once again, all the discretion, I pointed out he's got a history and a rap sheet. Tell me why.
I can tell you, sir, what I said earlier with respect to the fact that our
It's not that code, and you keep pointing to that code. It's not that code. This man, there is no reason why this man should be on the street.
I'm sorry, what did you just say?
It's not about that code.
The code?
That code that you keep
statute.
Yeah, it's not about that. This man, the whole rap sheet, this guy should have been incarcerated. Unfortunately, Grant's murder is not unique, and his murderer situation is not an isolated case. Is it, Director? It's not an isolated case, is it?
What is, sir, the specific facts of that case?
Yeah.
Well,
There's lots of them. We heard one from Mr. Cartwright.
yes, I think the numbers are in the record.
So how many aliens entered the United States illegally, were charged with felonies in FY 2015?
I'll have to look up that number, sir.
How many in 2016?
How many aliens who are in the system or who are out there in the public?
How many aliens who entered the United States illegally were charged with felonies? If you don't have those numbers, I'd like them for the record.
Well, sir,
2015 and 2016.
As I said earlier, there are 11.2 million aliens in the United States illegally.
I don't care about the 11 million. I'm asking about those that come in with felonies, that were charged with felonies.
Some we haven't encountered. There's no way we can have information on them.
How many aliens who entered the United States illegally were charged with felonies in FY 2015? You have those numbers. Want them.
We don't have those numbers.
After they got here. Don't you get it? I mean, you were a U.S.
Many of them are not trying to be found, sir. We don't have any record that they're here in the country. The 11.2 is an estimate.
Yeah, they are illegally here, and they were charged with a felony here. You got those numbers?
No, sir. They wouldn't be complete.
You have got to be kidding. These are illegals. So they come into this country, they're illegal. They've been charged with a felony. What are those numbers for in this country? Are you kidding me?
No, I'm not kidding you. I asked you to listen to my answer. There are 11.2 million people in the country illegally.
I'm not asking about the 11.2. I'm asking about those that are here illegally.
Time has expired.
Thank you.